In 1988, an Aloha Airlines short hop flight from the Big Island of Hawaii into Honolulu had something horrible happen in flight. At an elevation of 24,000 feet, part of the fuselage of that plane just ripped open. What you're looking at here, as you can see, is the first-class cabin of that airline. Amazingly, the pilots were able to land that flight safely, but not before one person was killed, and everybody who saw this picture, let alone who survived this flight, was just terrified. When the National Transportation Safety Board investigated why this happened in '88, they blamed something called metal fatigue, as well as corrosion. 2 summers ago, in July of 2009, the same type of aircraft, 737, had this piece fly off of it mid-flight. It's about a football-sized chunk of the plane's fuselage. This grainy cell phone video shows the result of that chunk flying off. That is the sky, actually, that you can see there. Yeah, planes don't have skylights. That is the sky you can see from inside the plane. This Southwest Airlines flight lost cabin pressure, but the pilots were ultimately able to land safely in West Virginia. When the NTSB looked into that one, it appeared, again, to be metal fatigue that caused the fuselage to break open like that. This past Friday, another Southwest Airlines Boeing 737 took off from Phoenix, Arizona. It was heading for Sacramento with 118 people aboard at 34,000 feet. This happened. A 5-foot-long hole tore open in the roof of the fuselage. The cabin lost pressure. The people on board were able to see the outside world through the big hole in the plane. A couple of people passed out. But again, the pilots were able to safely bring that plane down for an emergency landing in Yuma, Arizona. That investigation into what happened there is ongoing, but what has been turned up so far is extensive cracking on the fuselage of this 15-year-old plane. Cracking that would suggest metal fatigue. That sort of cracking is the sort of thing that maintenance crews are supposed to look for when they are looking for metal fatigue, but they reportedly don't tend to look at that particular part of the airplane as part of their regular checks. An NTSB board member telling the Associated Press today that the part of this plane that ripped open was not previously believed to be subject to a metal fatigue problem. So in terms of regular inspections, crews just weren't looking there before this incident happened. Now, of course, they will. And in fact, now they are. Southwest grounded some of its fleet of this model. They are now in the process of doing emergency inspections, and they have found cracking bad enough in 3 other 737s that they will permanently ground them. When you think about an accident like this, whose job is it to make sure that not just this one company that flies these kinds of planes does new inspections, but every company that flies these planes now will do these inspections? I mean, if the companies want to do these inspections out of the goodness of their hearts or fear of bad PR or something, right, that's great. But what if the companies don't want to do it? Should there be somebody who makes them do new inspections when we learn new information like this? Now that we know, because of this very scary picture, now that we know that this part of those planes should be looked at regularly to see if there's metal fatigue there too, who is going to make the airlines look at that part of their plane as part of their regular inspections? Don't tell the people who say the government isn't the solution to our problems, government is the problem. Don't tell those guys. But it is the government that does that. Part of the federal government known as the Federal Aviation Administration, which tomorrow will order that every airline that flies this kind of plane must inspect it for the kind of cracks that caused this incident on Friday over Arizona. That's the FAA's job. That's what they do. That is what is demonized as red tape. That's regulation, making companies do something that they don't necessarily want to do. That is big, bad government. This past weekend, a number of news sources, both in the U.S. and the U.K., reported that BP, the company famous for this, BP was in negotiations with the Department of the Interior to start drilling for oil again in the Gulf of Mexico. BP is already a financial partner in the first well that got a permit since the big BP blowout last year. But how about BP running its own deep water drilling operations once again in the Gulf of Mexico? Last time they did that in the Gulf, this happened. How about now? We are not yet a year out from the BP oil disaster, and the government is not done with the investigation of exactly why that accident happened. But BP apparently wants back in. And even though the government is denying reports that it is in negotiations with BP about 10 of these deep water wells, the government is very busy handing out new drilling permits, the most recent one coming this past Friday, the 8th new permit handed out in the last few weeks. We have been raking the Interior Department over the coals on this issue because despite their own report indicating that blowout preventers may not necessarily prevent blowouts, Despite a report saying that what we think of as a failsafe isn't a failsafe, they are still approving permits for wells using that technology. When we started complaining about that on the air, they told us they did not want to comment on their whole "the technology doesn't work" report because that issue is still under investigation. However, the fact that the investigation is still going on is not apparently keeping them from handing out new permits. It's just keeping them from commenting on how on earth they can justify giving those permits out while the investigation is still ongoing. The government making sure that drilling is safe, that is a core government function.